The rain-slicked streets of Chicago glistened under the early morning lights, a dull reflection of the bustling city life that rarely paused for anyone. In the midst of the corporate chaos, inside the marble halls of Harmon Enterprises, Michelle Carter pushed her mop silently across the polished floors. She moved with a quiet precision, her movements almost invisible, like a ghost among the busy lives of executives she would never meet. But today was different. Today, her 10-year-old daughter, Lily, sat at the grand piano in the empty lobby, her small hands trembling slightly over the keys. Lily had never seen the world, but she could feel it. Every drop of rain on the glass, every echo in the cavernous space, every note of music that came alive beneath her fingers. Michelle paused, leaning against the mop handle for a moment, watching her daughter. There was a bittersweet pride in her eyes. She knew Lily's talent was extraordinary, yet the world had no idea who they were. No one ever noticed a janitor or her blind daughter. Not really. And yet, someone did. From the shadows near the security desk, Jonathan Reed stood, umbrella dripping water onto the marble floor, his expensive shoes clicking softly as he froze in place. The sound of Lily's music pulled him in, a melody so familiar, so haunting. It pierced through the carefully constructed walls of wealth and power he had built around himself. He had no idea why his heart clenched at the sight of this small girl and her mother. He had never seen them before, or at least he thought he hadn't. The notes danced through the lobby, a duet of innocence and raw emotion, and Michelle could not resist. She sat beside Lily, sliding her fingers onto the keys, blending her own music with her daughter's. Together, they created a harmony so perfect, it seemed almost impossible, like the universe itself had written the song for this exact moment. Jonathan stepped closer, barely breathing. Something in the way Michelle's hands moved, the subtle gestures of her fingers, the shape of her smile when Lily hit the right note. He froze. A scar on her wrist. A tiny, nearly forgotten mark from years ago. He had seen it before. And in that instant, the first thread of realization tugged at him. He wasn't just captivated by the music. He wasn't just drawn to the mother and daughter. He remembered Michelle Carter, the woman he had loved and lost in a life that had moved on too fast, a life that had left no room for mistakes. And Lily. Something about Lily's playing, the way her hands danced over the keys with precision and emotion, felt hauntingly familiar. Not just familiar, but undeniable. Jonathan's mind raced. Could it be? Could this little girl, the child of incredible musical talent, be his daughter? The daughter he never knew existed? Michelle, unaware of the presence watching her, laughed softly at Lily's tiny mistakes and encouraged her. Don't worry, baby girl. Play it like you feel it. That's the secret. The sound of her voice, warm and familiar, sent a ripple through Jonathan's chest. Every memory, every lost moment, every quiet regret he had buried under piles of board meetings and business deals came rushing back. He knew he couldn't just stand there forever, but he also knew this moment, this fragile, beautiful moment, was too precious to interrupt recklessly. And so he watched, as Michelle and Lily played, their duet telling a story of love, loss, and hope. Jonathan felt the weight of years he could never reclaim. Every note was a reminder of what he had missed, and of what fate had finally placed before him. But he wasn't ready to reveal himself. Not yet. Not until he was certain. And as the final chord echoed through the marble lobby, hanging in the air like a question that demanded an answer, Michelle turned to Lily with a smile, blissfully unaware that the man standing just a few feet away would change their lives forever. Michelle Carter's life had never been easy. At 35, she carried the weight of the world on her shoulders, a single mother navigating a life that seemed determined to test her at every turn. Every day, she woke before dawn, prepared a modest breakfast for Lily, and stepped into the endless rhythm of cleaning offices at Harmon Enterprises. Her pay was barely enough to cover rent and bills, let alone the small luxuries she wished she could give her daughter. Yet, despite the exhaustion etched into her face, Michelle never complained. She moved with a quiet determination, the kind that comes from knowing the world will not bend to your desires. You bend yourself instead. Lily, blind since birth, had grown up in a world of sound, touch, and intuition. Where others saw limitations, she discovered possibilities. The piano had been her first love, a voice through which she could express everything she could not see. Her small fingers moved with uncanny precision, as though the music existed within her before it ever touched the keys. Michelle had nurtured that talent with everything she had. After her brief relationship with Jonathan Reed years ago, a whirlwind romance that had ended abruptly when he left unaware that Michelle was pregnant, she had vowed to protect Lily, to shield her from the harshness of life, and to give her every opportunity she could not claim for herself. It had not been easy. Nights were long, filled with worry about overdue bills, about rent, about whether she could afford another month of piano lessons for Lily. Days were spent cleaning offices, invisible to the people who walked past her, their lives untouched by the struggles she bore silently. Yet, in the small apartment they shared, the bond between mother and daughter was unbreakable. They laughed together, cried together, and made music together. It was a language all their own, a sanctuary from the judgment and blindness of the world around them. Michelle often thought back to that short, fleeting time with Jonathan, the man who had swept into her life with charm and confidence, only to leave without a word, leaving her alone with a secret she could never share. She had never told Lily about him. She didn't even dare mention his name. To Michelle, he was a ghost from a past life, irrelevant to the reality she had to survive every day. But Lily's music had a way of opening doors Michelle didn't know existed. Every note Lily played carried a depth and emotion far beyond her 10 years, an echo of a talent that seemed almost inherited. People who heard her could feel the soul behind the melody, though most assumed it came from years of practice or natural genius. Michelle knew better. She recognized it as a legacy, a gift that somehow bridged past and present, even if she could not yet see the full picture herself. Their mornings were routine but sacred. Michelle would watch Lily practice in the small patch of sunlight that hit the living room floor, occasionally joining her at the piano to guide a difficult passage. They spoke little while playing, because words were unnecessary. Their music said everything. In those moments, the world beyond their walls, the bills, the empty apartments, the lonely nights, disappeared entirely. Yet, fate had a way of intruding where life seemed settled. And on this particular morning in the lobby of Harmon Enterprises, the past that Michelle thought she had buried was quietly stepping closer, drawn to the very music that had always been their bond. For Jonathan Reed, standing unseen and captivated, the connection was immediate and inexplicable. The way Michelle's hands moved alongside Lily's, the gentle encouragement, the protective glance she cast over her daughter, it all stirred memories he had long tried to bury. The woman he had lost, and the child he never knew he had. He could not tear his eyes away. Every chord, every pause, every delicate crescendo seemed to whisper a truth he had never expected. His life had brought him here, to this lobby, to witness the daughter he had never known and the mother who had carried her alone for 10 years. Jonathan's heart pounded, caught between disbelief and hope. He watched them, silent, wishing for a moment he had never imagined, the chance to step into a life he had abandoned, to reconnect, to make up for lost time. But Michelle, lost in the music in her daughter's world, was blissfully unaware that the man who had once walked away was now watching, standing mere feet away from the woman and child who had unknowingly carried his legacy. Jonathan Reed was the kind of man the world admired or envied. At 42, he had built Harmon Enterprises from a fledgling startup into a global tech empire. His life was measured in contracts, board meetings, and power moves, each one executed with precision. Wealth came easily to him, influence even more so. And yet, despite the accolades and the public image of perfection, there was a hollowness that no amount of money could fill. Years of ambition and control had left Jonathan emotionally detached. Relationships were fleeting, trust was scarce, and love, real love, had become a concept he admired in others, never experienced for himself. He buried regrets deep beneath his polished suits and expensive watches, believing that if he ignored the past, it could no longer haunt him. And yet here he was, in the empty lobby of his own skyscraper, caught off guard by a sound he could not explain. A melody, delicate yet powerful, played by a blind child whose fingers danced across the piano keys like she had been born speaking music instead of words. Jonathan had never met this child. He had no idea who she was. And yet, every note pulled at something buried inside him, something he hadn't felt in years. Then there was Michelle. He noticed her instantly, not because of her work attire or mop, or the humble tasks she performed, but because of the way she moved, the careful, tender way she guided the girl's hands over the keys. There was a familiarity in her gestures, a subtle elegance in her posture, a presence that tugged at a memory he had long thought lost. Jonathan's pulse quickened. He could not explain why his heart ached as he watched her smile at Lily, encouraging her to play each note with feeling. Something about Michelle resonated with a part of him he had buried, a part of him that remembered love, laughter, and the life he had walked away from so many years ago. He stepped closer, careful not to make a sound, his expensive shoes silent on the polished marble. Each passing second was a mixture of fear and hope. fear that the life he had lost could not be reclaimed, and hope that the universe had brought him here for a reason he was only beginning to understand. Jonathan studied Michelle's hands. A scar on her wrist, small, faint, but unmistakable, suddenly jolted memories from the past. Memories of a woman he had loved, a woman who had disappeared without explanation. And then the music played by the little girl beside her. It carried a signature so distinct, so hauntingly familiar, that Jonathan felt a chill. Could it be possible? Could this child, this Lily, be his daughter? Questions swirled in his mind, but he remained still. He could not yet reveal himself. Not until he was certain. The risk of exposing himself too soon, of startling Michelle or harming the fragile bond between mother and child, was too great. And so he watched silently, allowing himself to feel something he had not allowed in years. Hope. Jonathan had built empires and conquered markets, but he had never faced a challenge like this. One that required patience, humility, and the courage to confront the mistakes of a life lived in haste. The mother and daughter continued their duet, unaware of the man who observed them with a mixture of awe and disbelief. Every note, every pause, every subtle glance exchanged between them was a language Jonathan did not understand fully, but he recognized it instinctively. It spoke of love, of sacrifice, of a bond forged through hardship and tender moments, and it spoke directly to the part of Jonathan that had longed for family, for connection, for something real beyond the walls of his corporate empire. And as the final chord of their morning performance lingered in the lobby, Jonathan knew, with a certainty that startled him, that this chance encounter was no accident. Fate had delivered him here, to this quiet moment, to witness the daughter he had never known and the woman he had never stopped loving. For Jonathan Reed, the powerful, untouchable CEO, life had finally introduced him to a challenge far greater than business deals or boardroom battles. It had introduced him to family, and a reckoning that would change everything. Michelle leaned down beside Lily, her fingers hovering over the piano keys as if waiting for a silent signal. She took a deep breath, letting the melody fill her lungs before joining her daughter in a soft, harmonious duet. The notes intertwined effortlessly, each one a conversation between mother and child, a dialogue without words yet full of meaning. Lily's small hands moved with precision, yet there was room for emotion, the tiny pauses, the subtle crescendos, the delicate falters that made the music feel alive. Michelle's hands complemented hers, guiding without dominating, creating a bond that resonated far beyond the piano itself. Jonathan stood frozen, captivated. Every chord that Michelle and Lily played seemed to echo a memory he had buried deep within himself. Then his eyes fell upon her wrist, a faint scar, nearly hidden beneath her sleeve. He froze. That scar. He had seen it before, many years ago, on the hand of the woman he had loved and lost. His mind raced. Could it really be her? Could Michelle Carter, the woman who had once been the center of a life he had abandoned, be standing here before him, her daughter playing the music that stirred something he could not yet name? The music continued, and in a strange, unspoken way. It became a language bridging past and present. Every note, every shared glance between mother and daughter, whispered of love, loss, and resilience. Jonathan realized he was not just witnessing a performance. He was witnessing a story that had begun years ago, in a life he had left behind. He wanted to speak, to step forward and demand answers, but he could not. Not yet. To interrupt now would shatter the delicate balance, risk frightening Lily, and potentially destroy the fragile connection that fate had so carefully orchestrated. Instead, he watched. He let the music wash over him, each note drawing him deeper into a past he thought he had abandoned. Memories of Michelle's laughter, the way her eyes had sparkled when she was truly happy, the warmth of moments he had foolishly let slip away. All of it pressed against his chest, leaving him breathless. Michelle, unaware of the man's presence, continued guiding Lily. "That's it, sweetheart. Feel it. Let the music tell the story." Her voice was soft but insistent, the kind of encouragement born from love and sacrifice. Lily smiled, her hands dancing with renewed confidence. In that moment, the lobby seemed to shrink around them. The rain outside, the city's noise, the corporate bustle, it all faded. There was only the music, only the bond between mother and daughter, and the man standing silently, recognizing a life that might have been his. Jonathan knew, without a doubt, that the universe had given him a second chance. But questions lingered, sharp and unrelenting. How much time had been lost? Could he step into their lives without causing harm? And most urgently, was Lily truly his daughter? The music tapered to a gentle finish, the final notes hanging in the air like a question unanswered. Michelle wiped her hands on her apron, smiling proudly at Lily. "You did amazing, baby girl." Jonathan's throat tightened. He wanted to speak, to reveal the truth in that very moment. But he waited, watching as Michelle laughed softly with Lily, feeling the weight of years pressing down on him and the fragile hope of a future that had been hidden from him until now. In that quiet lobby, amid the lingering notes of a piano, the first connection had been made, a subtle, invisible thread stretching between past mistakes and the possibility of redemption. And Jonathan knew one thing with perfect clarity: his life, and the lives of these two remarkable women, would never be the same again. Jonathan's heart stopped for a moment, and then raced faster than it had in years. There was no denying it anymore. The scar on Michelle's wrist, the way she guided Lily's hands over the keys, the quiet confidence and tenderness in her presence. It all came rushing back to him. Memories he had tried to lock away in a distant past. Michelle Carter, the woman he had loved and lost, the one he had walked away from, convinced life had moved on without her. And yet, here she was, standing in the lobby of Harmon Enterprises, 10 years older, stronger, yet unmistakably the same woman whose laugh had once been the brightest part of his life. And then his gaze shifted to Lily. The little girl's hands flew across the keys, hitting the chords with a grace and emotion that felt almost inherited. Jonathan's breath caught. He had recognized that musical style immediately. It was the same style that had been passed down through his own family, a tradition of precision, expression, and soul that only someone with his bloodline could possess. A shock ran through him. The realization hit like a lightning bolt. This child, this extraordinary little girl, was his daughter. The child he had never known. The legacy he never realized existed in front of him. Jonathan's mind spun. 10 years of absence. 10 years of missed birthdays, first steps, first words. And now, fate had brought him here, silently, to witness a life he had no right to claim, but a life that belonged to him nonetheless. He wanted to speak. He wanted to rush forward, to explain everything, to beg forgiveness for the years lost. But something inside him hesitated. Michelle was blissfully unaware, guiding her daughter with love and patience. If he revealed himself too soon, he risked frightening Lily, or worse, breaking the fragile trust that had been built between them. So he stayed in the shadows, watching. Every note Lily played, every subtle smile exchanged between mother and daughter, cut through the armor he had built around his heart. Each moment reminded him of the life he had let slip through his fingers and of the second chance he might yet be given, but only if he was careful. For the first time in a decade, Jonathan Reed felt powerless. Money, influence, power, they meant nothing here. Nothing compared to the truth, standing just a few feet away. The woman he had loved, and the daughter he had never met. As Michelle and Lily finished their duet, Jonathan swallowed hard, trying to steady his racing heart. He knew he had a choice. Step forward and risk everything, or wait and learn more before revealing the truth. Patience, he reminded himself, was the only way to protect them both, and maybe, just maybe, himself as well. The first connection had been made. The first revelation had struck. But the story was far from over. The next moments would determine whether fate would allow him back into their lives, or leave him as a silent witness to the family he had abandoned. And in that quiet Chicago lobby, with the rain tapping softly against the windows and the echoes of piano notes still lingering in the air, Jonathan Reed understood one thing clearly. Nothing would ever be the same again. Outside the polished marble halls of Harmon Enterprises, Michelle Carter's life was a world away from the echoes of piano notes and the watchful eyes of a billionaire. Her mornings began before dawn, not with luxury or ease, but with the relentless rhythm of survival. She would wake Lily gently, brush her daughter's hair, make a simple breakfast, and pack a small lunch, always hoping that the day would hold fewer surprises than the last. Once breakfast was over, Michelle would gather her cleaning supplies, slinging the mop over her shoulder like a shield against the challenges waiting in the corporate towers she tidied each day. The offices she cleaned were filled with people chasing wealth and ambition, people who never noticed her presence beyond a glance or a nod. She worked quietly, diligently, invisible yet indispensable. After the janitorial duties came the delicate balancing act of being a mother to a child who saw the world in ways most people could never imagine. Lily's blindness demanded constant attention, patience, and creativity. Michelle had learned to navigate the world through her daughter's ears, through the subtle cues of her environment that most people overlooked. Yet, even amidst the exhaustion and relentless responsibilities, Michelle nurtured her dreams. She dreamed of giving Lily more than just survival. She dreamed of providing a life where her daughter's talent could shine, where her music could reach ears that would understand and appreciate it. She sent Lily to piano lessons whenever she could afford them, taught her herself when she could not, and encouraged every note as if it were a step closer to something magical. In these moments, Michelle's resilience became apparent, not just to the world, which remained oblivious, but to anyone who might pause long enough to watch. She was strength disguised as humility, courage hidden behind a mop and a janitor's uniform, love expressed in small sacrifices no one would ever notice. And yet, in the midst of her routine, she remained unaware of the man whose presence had already begun to ripple through her life. Jonathan Reed watched silently, sometimes from the shadows of the lobby, sometimes glimpsed through the reflection in the polished floors, always careful not to startle her, always measuring his steps before revealing truths she could scarcely imagine. The irony was cruel and almost poetic. Michelle, who had spent 10 years surviving without him, had no idea that the very man who had abandoned her, who could have changed the course of her life, was standing just beyond the music, observing her love, patience, and extraordinary strength. It was in these ordinary moments that the extraordinary became visible. The way she soothed Lily when she stumbled over a note, the way she balanced bills and chores with unwavering determination, the quiet way she carried both grief and hope. It drew the audience in, inviting them to root for her, to feel every hardship she endured, and to invest emotionally in the life that was about to collide with someone she never expected. Every day, every struggle, every tender moment with Lily made Michelle stronger, and though she could not yet see Jonathan watching, each of her choices, each act of love and perseverance, was building toward a confrontation she could not avoid, and a revelation that would shock both her heart and the audience's. Because the quiet, unassuming janitor who moved through Harmon Enterprises each day held more than just a mop. She held a legacy. She held a child who carried the unmistakable mark of a life once lost, and now unexpectedly returned. And she held the key to a story of love, loss, and rediscovery that would leave everyone who witnessed it breathless. Jonathan Reed moved silently through the city streets, careful to remain invisible as he followed Michelle and Lily from a distance. He watched them leave their modest apartment each morning, the two of them navigating the world with a rhythm that was both ordinary and extraordinary. Michelle carried a backpack with Lily's books and supplies, her posture tired but steady. Lily clutched her small music bag, her fingers brushing the edges of the case as if feeling the notes already in her hands. Jonathan's heart twisted with a mixture of longing and guilt. 10 years. 10 years of birthdays missed, first words unheard, first steps unseen. And now, here they were, walking through life without him. And he had the power, perhaps the responsibility, to step forward. But every time he considered it, doubt clawed at him. Would Michelle ever forgive him? Could Lily ever accept a father she had never known? He slowed his pace as they approached the community center, where Lily took extra piano lessons. He lingered across the street, watching Michelle help her daughter navigate the crowded sidewalks, protectively holding her hand against strangers and obstacles. The tenderness, the patience, the unspoken communication between them, it was all so familiar, and yet it was new. He realized he had spent a lifetime seeking this kind of connection in boardrooms and contracts, only to discover it existed here, unnoticed by the world, yet so profound. Jonathan remembered the days he had left behind, the youthful passion that had drawn him to Michelle in the first place. He saw flashes of her laughter, the light in her eyes, and the moments of intimacy he had abandoned. The weight of regret pressed down on him like the rain-soaked streets of Chicago, heavy and unyielding. Every missed moment now loomed larger than any corporate victory he had ever achieved. And then there was Lily. He watched her fingers trace the contours of the piano keys in lessons, her instructor guiding her carefully, unaware of the silent observer in the street outside. Her style, her rhythm, the emotion she poured into each note. It was undeniable. This child carried a part of him, a legacy of his own blood and talent, and the realization hit him like a blow. She was his daughter. Jonathan's mind raced with possibilities, with the life they could have had together. Could he step in now and make up for the lost years? Could he rebuild a family that had been fractured before it even began? And yet, the fear of causing harm, of shattering the delicate bond between mother and daughter, held him back. So he waited. He watched. He observed from afar, letting the days pass as he studied their routines, their habits, their small moments of joy. Every laugh, every glance, Every shared secret between Michelle and Lily deepened his understanding of who they were and who he might have missed being. And with each passing day, the quiet ache in his chest grew stronger. Jonathan Reed, the man who had conquered industries and accumulated wealth beyond measure, found himself powerless in the face of something far greater, love lost, and the chance to reclaim it. The suspense weighed on him, but so did hope. He began to plan, not recklessly, but carefully. The first step would be understanding, observing, and confirming the truth. The second step, when the time was right, would be revelation. And all the while, Michelle and Lily continued their lives, blissfully unaware that the man who had once walked away was following them, learning, yearning, and preparing for a moment that could change everything. In the quiet, rainy streets of Chicago, a story of love, regret, and redemption was quietly taking shape. The lobby of Harmon Enterprises was quiet that afternoon, the usual bustle of employees and clients replaced by an unusual stillness. Michelle Carter wheeled the piano bench closer to Lily, her eyes soft with encouragement. "Ready, baby girl?" she whispered. Lily nodded, her small hands poised over the keys, her blind eyes focused as if seeing the music in her mind. They began slowly, the melody gentle at first, almost hesitant. But with each note, the music grew, swelling with emotion, carrying with it a depth of feeling that words could never convey. Michelle and Lily moved as one, a duet not just of sound, but of heart and soul. Every pause, every subtle accent, every delicate flourish told a story of love, loss, and resilience. Jonathan Reed stood across the room, leaning against the cold marble wall, and found himself unable to look away. Tears pricked at the corners of his eyes. The music was more than beautiful. It was hauntingly familiar. Each chord seemed to resonate with a memory he had long tried to bury, each harmony pulling him closer to a truth he was only beginning to comprehend. The connection between mother and daughter was undeniable. It was in the way Michelle's hands guided Lily's, the gentle encouragement in her voice, the shared laughter when a note was missed, and the quiet pride that followed a particularly difficult passage. Jonathan realized, with a pang that pierced him deeper than any boardroom failure ever could, that this bond, the bond of love, patience, and sacrifice, was something he had never experienced in his life. And then it struck him. Lily's style, the phrasing, the emotion, the subtle inflections in each note, was unmistakable. It was the same musical heritage that had flowed through his own family for generations. The recognition hit him like a wave. The child before him, blind yet brilliant, was undeniably his daughter. Jonathan's chest tightened. The years of absence, the mistakes, the opportunities he had squandered, they all pressed down on him with unbearable weight. And yet, in that moment, he felt a flicker of hope. The music, this bridge between mother and daughter, was also a bridge to him. It was a thread, delicate yet unbreakable, connecting him to the life he had lost, and giving him the chance to step into it again. Michelle played on, unaware of the man watching, her voice soft and tender as she encouraged Lily. "Feel it, baby girl. Let it flow from your heart." And Lily, lost in the music, responded, her fingers dancing over the keys with precision and soul that belied her 10 years. Jonathan took a step closer, almost instinctively, and had to catch himself before she noticed. He swallowed the lump in his throat, feeling emotions he had thought were long dead, love, regret, awe, and a longing that could not be denied. For a brief, transcendent moment, time seemed to stand still. The music held them together, not just Michelle and Lily, but Jonathan as well, linking 3 lives separated by circumstance, distance, and years of unspoken truths. He realized that no wealth, no power, no accomplishments could compare to this connection, this raw, unfiltered bond. And when the final chord lingered in the lobby, soft and haunting, Jonathan felt tears run down his cheeks. He had watched, he had waited, and now he knew the truth. The woman who had held his heart once, and the child he had never known, were here, right in front of him. The music had spoken louder than words ever could. It had bridged the gap of years, revealed hidden truths, and pulled at the deepest corners of his soul. Jonathan knew, with certainty, that the moment for revelation was drawing near, but he also knew that the timing had to be perfect. Too soon, and he might shatter everything. Too late, and he might lose the chance forever. The melody hung in the air like a promise, a fragile, beautiful thread connecting past, present, and the possibility of a future that none of them had dared to imagine. Jonathan Reed took a deep breath, steeling himself as he stepped out of the shadows and into the warm light of the Harmon Enterprises lobby. Each step was measured, careful, Not the confident stride of a billionaire CEO used to commanding attention, but the hesitant approach of a man confronting a past he had long tried to bury. Michelle looked up from the piano, wiping her hands on her apron, and for a fleeting moment, the world seemed to shift. She saw a tall man standing a few feet away, impeccably dressed, with an intensity in his eyes that made her pause. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice polite but guarded. Jonathan swallowed hard. The words he had rehearsed 100 times tangled in his throat. I couldn't help but notice your daughter's music," he said finally, keeping his tone neutral, careful not to reveal too much. "She's remarkable." Michelle's eyes narrowed slightly, a mixture of pride and suspicion. "Thank you," she replied. "She works hard." Jonathan nodded, studying the way Michelle interacted with Lily. The same grace, the same warmth, the same careful attention. Everything about her spoke of the woman he had loved and lost so many years ago. "You remind me of someone I once knew," he said cautiously, letting the words hang in the air. Michelle's brow furrowed. There was something in his expression, something familiar, but she couldn't place it. "I'm not sure I understand," she said, curiosity mixed with caution. Jonathan hesitated, torn between revealing the truth and protecting the fragile normalcy of their mourning. "It's complicated," he admitted. "There's a part of my past I've never been able to forget. Seeing you and your daughter, it's brought back memories I didn't think I would ever feel again." Michelle's eyes softened slightly, but there was still a wall there, a shield forged from years of disappointment and struggle. She nodded slowly, unsure whether to trust a stranger or dismiss him as just another passerby. "I see," she said carefully. "Well, I appreciate your kind words. Lily works very hard." Jonathan's chest tightened. He wanted to tell her everything, about the past, about her child, but he knew he had to wait. The timing wasn't right. Instead, he leaned slightly closer, his voice gentle but sincere. "You're an incredible mother," he said. "She's lucky to have you." Michelle blinked, caught off guard by the sincerity in his tone. It wasn't flattery, she realized. It was genuine, deep, and somehow familiar. Her instinct screamed at her to be wary, but part of her felt a strange sense of recognition, a pull she could not explain. For a few heartbeats, the lobby was silent except for the faint echoes of Lily's practice from earlier. Jonathan and Michelle simply regarded each other, two lives linked by history and circumstance, each weighing the possibilities of what might come next. And in that silence, tension thickened. Jonathan longed to reveal the truth, to bridge the decade of absence in one bold confession. Michelle, meanwhile, struggled with a mixture of curiosity and caution. Could she trust him? Could she allow this stranger into the world she had fought so hard to protect? The unspoken questions hung heavy in the air, heavier than any words could carry. Every second that passed brought them closer to revelation, and closer to a confrontation with a past neither had fully understood. Jonathan knew one thing. The moment for careful observation had ended. The moment for action, whether it would heal or shatter, was approaching. And he had to be ready. Jonathan Reed stepped back into his private office later that day, his mind racing. He had tried to observe carefully, approach cautiously, and gauge the bond between Michelle and Lily without disrupting their lives, but one thing remained unconfirmed. He needed proof, tangible evidence that this extraordinary child was indeed his daughter. After searching through old records he had kept for years, a faint, lingering hope tucked away among contracts and business files, Jonathan found it. A small envelope, yellowed with age, containing a copy of a birth certificate he had never seen before, marked with the name, Lily Carter. His heart hammered as he read the date, the details, the mother's name. There it was, irrefutable proof. Lily was his daughter. The reality hit him harder than any boardroom loss, harder than any financial failure. For 10 years, he had been living unaware, and now fate had handed him the opportunity to reclaim the family he never knew he had. He returned to the lobby, keeping the envelope concealed in his briefcase. His mind replayed every moment with Michelle and Lily, every note of music, every tender glance. The evidence confirmed what he had already felt in his heart. They were his family, and the time for hesitation was over. Jonathan approached Michelle again, the weight of truth heavy on his shoulders. "Michelle," he began, his voice steady yet tinged with urgency. "There's something I need to show you, something that explains everything." Michelle looked up, curiosity and suspicion flickering across her face. "What is it?" she asked cautiously, sensing the gravity in his tone. With careful hands, Jonathan produced the envelope and slid the birth certificate across the table. Michelle's eyes widened as she read the document, her breath catching in her throat. The name, the date, the connection. It all stared back at her in stark clarity. For a moment, the lobby seemed to shrink around her. Memories of the past, of the man who had left so abruptly, collided with the present, and Michelle felt a whirlwind of emotions: shock, disbelief, anger, and an instinctive fear of being exploited. Was this a game? A manipulation? After 10 years of survival, she had learned to trust very few, and the idea that the man standing before her could be Lily's father seemed almost impossible. "Why now?" she demanded, her voice trembling. "Why are you here after all these years?" Jonathan lowered his eyes, his expression sincere. "Because I didn't know, because I never knew she existed," he admitted. "I made mistakes, I left, and I've regretted it every single day. But I've found out the truth, and I want to make it right. I want to be a part of both of your lives, if you'll let me." Michelle's hands tightened around the edge of the piano, her mind racing. The life she had built for Lily was fragile and precious. She had protected her daughter from disappointment, from heartache, from people who might hurt her. Could she trust Jonathan? Could she allow this stranger, this man from her past, to enter their lives without shattering everything she had fought so hard to preserve? For the first time in years, she felt uncertainty and vulnerability all at once. She had lived a life of struggle and self-reliance, and now she faced a choice that would redefine everything: rejection or trust, caution or hope, solitude or reunion. The audience, invisible witnesses to her turmoil, could feel the tension in every breath, every glance, every heartbeat. This was a moment that demanded reflection, not just from Michelle, but from anyone who had ever wondered whether to forgive, whether to hope, whether to let someone back into a life they had worked so hard to protect. And as she lifted her eyes to meet Jonathan's, the gravity of the decision settled in. He was no longer just a man from the past. He was a part of their present, and perhaps a part of the future she had never dared to imagine. The seconds stretched, thick with possibility, suspense, and emotion. Michelle's next words, the decision she would make, would change the course of all their lives. And in that moment, the audience held its collective breath, waiting to see whether love and fate would triumph over fear and skepticism. Back in the sleek, glass-walled boardroom of Harmon Enterprises, Jonathan Reed sat at the head of the table, his mind only half on the financial reports and quarterly projections in front of him. His thoughts kept drifting back to Michelle and Lily, to the fragile bond he had glimpsed, to the birth certificate proving what he had long feared and hoped. Lily was his daughter. His distracted demeanor did not go unnoticed. Executives exchanged wary glances, subtle murmurs filling the otherwise silent room. To them, Jonathan's hesitation and unusual focus were weaknesses, opportunities to advance their own agendas. Among them was a rising star named Derek Caldwell, a sharp, ambitious executive who had long resented Jonathan's perfection and influence. Derek noticed the CEO's distracted gaze, the way his hand absent-mindedly tapped on the polished oak table, and his mind began spinning. If Jonathan's attention could be divided, if his focus could falter, there was potential to exploit it. Meanwhile, whispers began circulating about Michelle Carter, a janitor with a child who had recently gained attention in the company lobby. Some executives scoffed at the idea of her being relevant, but Derek, always hungry for leverage, saw opportunity. A simple rumor, a vague threat, or even a well-timed accident could destabilize Jonathan personally, and by extension professionally. Jonathan, seated at the head of the table, felt the weight of unseen eyes upon him. The threats were subtle, masked under polite conversation and routine reports, but he sensed them all the same. The world he had built, the empire he had grown from nothing, could crumble if anyone targeted what he now held most dear, Michelle and Lily. He realized that the stakes were no longer confined to personal reunion. Protecting Michelle and Lily meant navigating corporate treachery as well. The same people who had once been allies, or at least indifferent colleagues, could now pose danger. Every move he made in the boardroom would have repercussions for the two lives he had come to cherish. Jonathan's mind worked furiously, strategizing without revealing vulnerability. Meetings became tests of subtle power, emails and memo shields, and every glance from Derek felt like a challenge. But beneath it all, a deeper determination burned. He would not allow anyone to harm Michelle or Lily, and he would not let his own hesitation jeopardize the fragile connection he had just discovered. Meanwhile, Michelle continued her daily life outside the corporate battlefield, unaware of the growing tension inside the glass towers above. Her focus remained on Lily, on their routines, on the music that bound them together. But Jonathan knew the outside world was encroaching on their sanctuary. He could sense the danger, the envy, the ambition masked as politeness, and he understood that this was no longer just a story about love and reunion. It was a story about survival, protection, and reclaiming what had been lost. The audience could feel the dual tension, the intimate emotional stakes of a family reuniting, now mirrored by the corporate machinations threatening their safety. It was no longer a question of whether Michelle would trust Jonathan. It was a question of whether the three of them could navigate a world that wanted to exploit their vulnerability. And as Jonathan left the boardroom, his jaw set with resolve. He knew that every step forward, every careful approach, every measured word, every protective decision would determine whether the bonds of family could withstand not only the weight of the past, but the pressures of a world that often valued power over people. The stakes had risen. The personal was now entangled with the professional. And the story of Michelle, Lily, and Jonathan was about to enter a chapter that would test them in ways no music, no reunion, and no love alone could prepare them for. The first few days after the revelation were quiet, tentative, and full of uncertainty. Michelle moved cautiously, her heart wary yet curious. Jonathan, once the untouchable CEO, had become something new, a man learning how to navigate love, regret, and the fragile trust of the family he had abandoned. And Lily, with her unspoken intuition and boundless curiosity, seemed to sense the change in the air even before words could explain it. It began simply, in the soft morning light of their modest apartment. Jonathan knelt beside Lily at the piano, his fingers hovering over the keys. "Show me again," he said gently, his voice soft with reverence. Lily hesitated only for a moment before allowing him to play along with her, the two of them weaving music together in perfect harmony. Michelle watched from the doorway, a mixture of hope and caution in her eyes. She saw the careful attention in Jonathan's hands, the patience as he guided Lily's fingers over tricky passages, the way he mirrored her own nurturing gestures. In those moments, Michelle began to see him not just as the man who had left her, but as someone capable of learning, of loving, and of taking responsibility for the past. The music became a bridge, connecting the three of them in ways words could not. Each chord resonated with shared history, unspoken apologies, and the beginnings of trust. Jonathan's own heart, long armored against disappointment and loss, began to soften as he felt the depth of the bond he had missed for a decade. Later, in quiet evenings over simple dinners, Michelle and Jonathan reminisced, not just about the past, but about the dreams they had once shared and the life they might still build. They spoke of regrets, of what could have been, and of the child who had changed everything. Michelle's laughter, cautious but genuine, reminded Jonathan of the woman he had loved, while her strength reminded him why he had never stopped thinking of her. Lily, with her bright smile and gentle hands, became the center of their new family universe. Jonathan marveled at her resilience, at the brilliance hidden within her blindness, and at the way music flowed through her as naturally as breathing. Together, they practiced, laughed, and shared quiet moments that stitched together years of separation into a fragile, beautiful tapestry of second chances. Life lessons unfolded naturally in their daily interactions. Jonathan learned humility, the understanding that wealth and power could never replace the quiet, profound impact of love, patience, and care. Michelle learned the courage to let someone in after years of guarding herself and her daughter. And Lily, in her innocent wisdom, taught them both that family is more than blood or presence. It is trust, sacrifice, and the willingness to forgive and embrace life as it comes. The audience could feel the emotional pulse of these moments, the small victories of shared music, the tentative steps of rebuilding trust, and the quiet joy of discovering that second chances are possible, even when life seems determined to keep them out of reach. Together, they learned that life is unpredictable, that love is worth fighting for, and that no amount of money or power can ever replace the warmth and resilience of a family united. The bonds being forged in those ordinary, everyday moments were stronger than any corporate empire, more enduring than any past mistakes, and infinitely more meaningful than anything money could buy. And in the quiet harmony of their growing family, the three of them discovered something extraordinary. The past could be forgiven, the future could be embraced, and the music of their hearts could finally play in unison. The day of the Harmon Enterprises Charity Gala arrived with a crisp Chicago evening, settling over the city. Crystal chandeliers sparkled, and the hum of conversation filled the grand ballroom, mingling with the soft strains of background music. Jonathan Reed, impeccably dressed, walked beside Michelle and Lily, a quiet pride shining in his eyes. Tonight was more than just a corporate event. It was an opportunity to share a part of his life he had kept hidden for years, to honor the extraordinary talent of the daughter he had never known, and to embrace the woman who had survived so much and yet remained endlessly resilient. When they reached the stage, the audience fell silent, curious about the young girl who had been introduced as a prodigy from the local community. Lily settled at the piano, her small fingers poised over the keys, and Michelle stood beside her, her hand gently resting on the girl's shoulder. Jonathan watched from the side, his chest tight with emotion. He had rehearsed nothing, yet every note that followed felt inevitable, as though the music had been waiting for this moment all along. Lily began to play, her fingers gliding over the keys with precision and soul that left the audience breathless. Michelle joined her, weaving harmony with soft, expressive chords, and together they created a duet that spoke of love, loss, hope, and resilience. The crowd watched in awe, but Jonathan saw more than their admiration. He saw the unmistakable mark of his family's musical heritage in Lily's hands, the tender guidance of Michelle's love, and the bond that had survived years of separation. His eyes filled with tears as he stepped forward, unable to remain hidden any longer. Taking the stage beside them, Jonathan placed a gentle hand on Michelle's shoulder. "This is my daughter," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "And this is my family." Gasps rippled through the audience. Cameras flashed, and whispers surged like waves. For Michelle, it was a moment of shock and validation. She had struggled in silence for so long, and now, in front of hundreds, the truth of their extraordinary lives was undeniable. The woman who had been invisible to the world suddenly stood in full recognition, not for wealth or status, but for courage, love, and sacrifice. Jonathan knelt beside Lily, who looked up at him with innocent, trusting eyes. "You've always been my inspiration," he whispered, "and now I get the honor of being your father." Lily's small hand reached for his, and in that touch, decades of absence, doubt, and regret melted away. Michelle, tears streaming down her face, realized that trust had finally been rewarded, and that the love she had protected and nurtured all these years had returned, stronger than ever. The music swelled, the audience captivated not only by the talent, but by the story unfolding before them. It was a tale of second chances, of resilience, of love that could not be broken by time or distance. For Jonathan, it was a public declaration of fatherhood, a redemption of past mistakes. For Michelle, it was recognition that her sacrifices had not been in vain. And for Lily, it was the beginning of a life where her extraordinary gift was celebrated and shared, surrounded by love and protection. As the final notes echoed through the ballroom, applause erupted, not polite, not measured, but overwhelming, heartfelt, and unstoppable. It was a celebration not just of music, but of reunion, courage, and the triumph of family over fear and adversity. In that moment, Chicago seemed to fade away, leaving only the bond of three souls reunited. And Jonathan Reed, billionaire CEO, once defined by power and ambition, understood something far more valuable. No empire, no fortune, could ever compare to the love of a family found and cherished. The audience witnessed more than a performance. They witnessed a miracle of life, love, and second chances. And for Michelle, Lily, and Jonathan, it was the emotional climax of a journey that had begun in silence, shadows, and unanswered questions, now transformed into harmony, hope, and the promise of forever. In the weeks following the gala, life for Michelle, Lily, and Jonathan began to transform in ways none of them could have anticipated. Michelle no longer faced the constant strain of financial uncertainty. Jonathan ensured that she and Lily had everything they needed, not as charity, but as the foundation for the life they deserved. For the first time in years, Michelle felt a sense of security, a reassurance that she could focus on raising her daughter without the constant burden of struggle. Lily thrived under the gentle guidance of both her mother and father. She continued her piano studies with renewed passion, her talent now nurtured not just by love, but by opportunity. Private lessons, performance opportunities, and exposure to the world of music that had always been a part of her heritage opened doors she had only dreamed of before. Yet amidst this growth, she remained grounded, her bond with Michelle as unbreakable as ever, strengthened by the presence of Jonathan. For Jonathan, the experience was transformative. The empire he had spent decades building now seemed secondary to the family he had rediscovered. He learned humility, the understanding that wealth and power could not replace trust, love, and shared moments of vulnerability. Personal connection, holding Lily's hand as she practiced, listening to Michelle's laughter, sharing quiet evenings filled with conversation and music, became far more valuable than any boardroom victory. The family grew together, learning from one another, healing old wounds, and celebrating small victories. Jonathan began to recognize that life's true fortunes are measured not in assets or accolades, but in the strength of bonds, the courage to forgive, and the courage to embrace second chances. Michelle, once guarded and wary, allowed herself to hope again. Lily, blind yet brilliantly perceptive, reminded them every day that love and resilience can illuminate even the darkest paths. Lessons emerged naturally from their journey. Fate had brought them together in unexpected ways, proving that even years of separation could not erase the ties of blood and love. Love had shown its power, teaching patience, forgiveness, and the strength to rebuild. Destiny, once hidden behind missed opportunities and heartbreak, had ultimately led them to one another, highlighting that no loss is ever final and no connection truly forgotten. For the audience, these lessons resonated deeply, that life may take unexpected turns, that challenges do not define us, and that the people who matter most may appear in ways we never anticipate. The story of Michelle, Lily, and Jonathan became a testament to perseverance, to the value of family over wealth, and to the extraordinary possibilities that emerge when courage meets opportunity. And in the quiet of their newly shared home, as piano notes drifted softly through sunlit rooms, Michelle, Lily, and Jonathan discovered something more precious than fortune or fame: the irreplaceable warmth of family, the joy of reunion, and the enduring truth that love, when nurtured, can heal even the deepest wounds. Their journey had begun in shadows and uncertainty, but it ended in light, hope, and the promise of a future where every note of their lives resonated in harmony. As the sun set over the Chicago skyline, casting golden light across the city streets, Michelle, Lily, and Jonathan sat together in quiet contentment. The chaos of the past, missed years, struggles, and uncertainty had given way to a fragile, beautiful peace. They were no longer defined by absence or regret, but by connection, trust, and the love they had fought to nurture. Sometimes, life hides miracles in plain sight. The people we pass every day, the moments we overlook, the choices we hesitate to make. They may hold the power to change everything. Michelle had spent years working in silence, unseen by the world, yet her courage, resilience, and love had created ripples that even a billionaire could not ignore. Jonathan had wandered through life unaware of the family that waited for him, and Lily, with her blind eyes and boundless spirit, had carried a legacy that would unite them all. The story of their reunion reminds us that second chances are real, that love can endure the cruelest tests of time, and that the family we cherish, whether by blood, circumstance, or choice, is worth every risk, every leap of faith. And as viewers, as witnesses to their journey, we are invited to reflect. Are we overlooking the miracles in our own lives? Are we allowing pride, fear, or distraction to blind us to the people who may shape our destiny? In the end, the most extraordinary discoveries often happen quietly, in the spaces we least expect. A smile, a song, a simple act of kindness, they can bridge years of absence, heal old wounds, and transform ordinary lives into something extraordinary. Michelle, Lily, and Jonathan remind us that love is patient, that courage is quiet, and that hope, when embraced, can illuminate even the darkest paths. Sometimes, the ones we overlook are the ones who will change everything, and in that truth lies the real lesson of their story. Life is full of unseen miracles, waiting for us to notice, waiting for us to act, waiting for us to open our hearts.